Welcome to the Resilient Surgeon, part of the STS Surgical Hot Topics podcast. Our goal with the Resilient Surgeon series is to inspire our colleagues to be their best selves in and out of the operating room, using scientifically proven tools and recovery strategies of the world's top performers. I'm Dr. Michael Maddaus, and in each episode, I will talk to game changers who will share evidence-based practices, real-world strategies, and their own personal stories and experiences to help you build your resilience and to help you be your best self no matter what. Our guest today on The Resilient Surgeon is Dr. Adam Fraser, and the topic is how to be your best self when you walk through the door to your home and loved ones after work by creating a third space. Imagine these two perspectives. The first is yours, that of a surgeon. It's 7 p.m. You've had a long day. You've done 3 major cases. One of them had to convert to open and a couple of small ones in between. And you dealt with the usual email tsunami. You saw a couple of new patients in clinic between cases, all without even a few minutes for yourself to collect your thoughts and decompress. Plus now, as usual, you're an hour late for dinner. The second perspective is that of your significant other and your family. Their surgeon partner was out the door before you and the kids were up, and you've been rushing around, shuttling the kids to school and their other activities, dealt with a plugged-up toilet, corralled the dog back home after it ran off, and you finally managed to fit in a quick trip to the grocery store to get stuff for dinner and to get around to cooking at 5 o'clock since your partner will supposedly be home at 6 o'clock. Dinner is ready and on the stove, and finally, with the kids begging to eat, 7 o'clock comes and the text that your surgeon partner just walked out of the hospital. Sound familiar? It certainly was in my life. 2 very different experiences, but also very similar. Stressful, but everyone trying to do their best. When these 2 people with cumulative stress of the day encounter each other, they are going to potentially deliver a large dose of emotional contagion to the other partner, unless there is an intervention, but not from an outside party, from each of them individually on themselves. What most families need at the end of the day is for a caring, loving, and present partner and parent to show up. Easier said than done, given the intensity of our work and busy lives. But in today's podcast, Dr. Adam Fraser will share with us the serendipitous discovery he made that can make the daily reunion a positive one, by creating a third space between work and coming home where we can decompress, reorient, and get present to the transition home. Now, instead of bringing home a big bag of stress and dumping it on the counter, you can bring home a more positive, thoughtful, patient, and caring version that will help your partner, your children, and everyone have a better night and a deeper sense of connection and psychological safety around you. How you show up matters a lot. And now I bring you Dr. Adam Fraser. Our guest today on The Resilient Surgeon is Dr. Adam Fraser, and the topic is the third space. Adam, welcome to The Resilient Surgeon. It's a great honor to have you here.
Thanks very much, Mike. I'm very happy to be here. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Adam comes to us all the way from Australia. He lives just outside Sydney. So our topic today is the third space, as you've called it, and it's such a great name. And I came across your TED Talk on YouTube, and I was stunned by it, and I wrote a newsletter, blog post about it and everything else. And what I'd love for you to do is just kind of unfold the story of how you came onto this. And, you know, of course, you've written a book about the third space, and I think this is such an important tactic for our colleagues to know about in terms of managing their transitions, both at home, into home, and throughout the day. So the story of how you came about this is really wonderful. So if you could just kind of go through it, it'd be great.
Yeah, well, it kind of started where I'm sure you find it in your work where you start to see themes that come up and appear. And I was like, I kept seeing this piece about transition. So like one of them was Jim Lewis' research around elite tennis players. What he found is it was what they did in between the points rather than what they did in the points that separated them. You know, during the point, they're all very similar. You know, the top 500 tennis players, have similar sort of ability and physical prowess. But he showed their ability to like lose a point and get over it really fast, to calm themselves in between points, to be present. So that was one of the things. And another was I was working with some soldiers and talking to them about, similar stuff that you look at of resilience and how do they cope. And I asked them, what's the hardest part about being a soldier? And they said, easily coming home. They said after we've been deployed, we come home, we usually fight with the family for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And one of them talked about how he actually transitioned back into that environment consciously. So I kept seeing this sort of high performers were great at how they moved between the different parts of their world. But probably the big one was when I had dinner with a CEO in his home, and he was just amazingly present and playful and fun. And at the end of the meal, I kind of said, hey, how do you go from psycho businessman to super dad? Like, how do you do that? And what he talked about is that he built a new entrance into his home. Now, I know we don't all have the cash flow to do that, but he would park the car in the garage. He would walk through a door that went straight to his room. He didn't interact with the family. He said, I'm off limits. Like, they can't talk to me. I go into my room, I take off my suit, I have a shower, and I visualize washing the day off me. And then, I do a little relaxation exercise. Then I go greet the family. And he said, it's a 15-minute investment, but it's so worth it. And what he talked about is that was how he shifted from work mode to home mode. So really, and then I started to explore this. I gave it language, which is the third space.
But Adam, can I just ask you to tell a little more about that CEO? Because what was he like at work? And then what was it that led him to want to actually go and build a new entrance to the house? I mean, what was a precipitating element of that for him?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I mean, him at work, I got to observe a lot. He was a great leader, but like all leaders, they have their bad moments, or they have frustrating days, or he was a very high-paced individual. But he was a totally different persona. And well, the triggering event was, he said, one day I came home from work and I opened the front door and I step in the house, and as the door peeled back, I caught a glimpse of my children running around the corner of the kitchen and then out into the backyard. So he said, literally, my children heard me come home and they ran away. And he just went, wow, and that's what got him thinking about how do I show up better for my family? So that's like, the concept of the third space is how do we transition, whether it's I go from a sales meeting where I got rejected to the next sales meeting, whether it's I'm a surgeon, I've had some sort of personal issue, then I'm stepping into surgery, or even I'm about to go into a consult with a patient and I have to give them really bad news. But then also, well, after that, how do I recover so I give the next patient the best of me? So the third space is about how do we use these kind of micro transitions in our day.
Yeah, as a surgeon, I mean, I remember all too well, you got 4 or 5 cases in a day, and I mean, one can go not as well as you had hoped, and you gotta get recovered. But one of the problems that is so ubiquitous in our modern world is that there's so much to do that you walk out of the OR and you're tending to just keep pushing at all the to-dos that you've got to do and everything else, the pressure of that. So decisions are a big deal.
Yeah, and I think like you hit the nail on the head there in terms of the pace at which we're running from one thing to another is so intense that we rarely think about that transitional space. And what our data shows is all too often we take the mood and mindset of one thing into the next thing. We have a bad day, we take it home with us. We have a bad meeting, we take it out on, members of our team. And I think
not intentionally.
Yeah, exactly. We just carry the mood and mindset.
Yeah.
So, and that was one of the big faults, is often we would carry over what we've just experienced and then it doesn't serve us in the next interaction. And even like we've been working with a law firm at the moment. They're trying to really innovate, and they have these sort of sessions where people come together and brainstorm and have ideas. And they said, they're just terrible at it. Like they're shooting down ideas. No one's sharing. Everyone goes, oh, we tried that. And I said, well, what are they doing beforehand? And most of these were contract lawyers. So they're looking at contracts. So their whole thing is, I'm trying to find the holes in this and what's wrong and what's bad about this, or how could this come back and bite us? And then they march them into a meeting and go, innovate and brainstorm. But they've got this mentality. And one of the things we did with them is got them to practice like improv exercises.
Yes.
That improv comedians do before they walk out on stage. And it just changed.
Priming the pump.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it has application to so many parts of our life. And, whether it's professional, whether it's personal,
This is why I was so excited to have you on the podcast. There's a lot of stuff out there for us, like how to improve, right? I mean, it's overwhelming, but this is one of these golden gems that can transform relationships at home, relationships at work, creativity, literally. I'm convinced. And our family struggled mightily with, emotional contagion when my wife would come home or me, I mean, and the stress of the day just dragged in with us. And it was really rough at times. It was really very rough for our family at times because of that.
Yeah. And particularly, a high performing person like yourself, your wife, the people listening to this are, very capable, very smart, driven, and we often get stuck in that mode, whereas our home environment needs much more compassion, understanding, connection, and we just show up with a mindset that doesn't suit that environment.
Yeah Transitioning from one environment to the other. All right, so the kind of universe is tickling you with these things. And then what happened then? How did this start to evolve in terms of your developing the concept of the third space?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do a lot of keynote speaking, and most of my keynotes were about performance and culture and leadership. But for the last 10 minutes of my keynote, I'd tell the CEO story. And I just said, hey, I came across this thing. It works so well. I don't really understand it, but I want you to go try it. And what happened is afterwards, people would come up and talk to me, and they wouldn't want to talk about performance or culture. They want to talk about that transition. Or
the heck with all the rest of your talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just, the talk I'd been working on for 10 years. And then they would email me, and it just became a thing.
Yeah.
So, and I just started to notice how important this was for people. And then I partnered with the university to study, did this actually work? And what were the key elements? What makes a good transition? So that was the thing. And then we went the next step of, okay, let's really codify this thing and understand it. Yeah. So that's some of the journey to us developing this concept.
And how did you go about studying it and codifying it? What was the process that you went through on that?
Yeah, it took us about 3 years and what we trialed was different patterns of behavior or different things in that transition. And what we were measuring is what had the biggest outcome. So what we found is the ultimate transition has 3 parts to it. The first part is the reflect phase. So as we leave something, we tend to think about it and shut it down and close it off. But what we found is in most people, that reflection was cynical, meaning, oh gosh, I screwed that up, or that was terrible, or I forgot to do that, or I've got to get back to that patient. And they would focus on all the bad things about the day. So what we asked people to do was reflect on 3 questions, which is what went well, what did I achieve, how do I get better? And now some people listening to this, because of your incredible studies and research and background, some people might go, well, that sounds a bit herbal and fluffy for me. But we actually got these questions from Special Forces soldiers. So we did a project with them, and you talk about herbal and fluffy. These are the toughest people on the planet.
Yeah.
Like I've worked with Olympic athletes, special forces is like a whole next level.
Whole next level.
And I said to them, why do you ask those questions? And they said, look, after we do an activity, we're naturally prone to going, okay, what was bad, or what was the capability gap there? They said that happens naturally, but those three questions focus us on progress and evolution. And they help us to go, well, actually, I think we're nailing this. So how do we repeat it, or how do we build on it? So that's that positive, well, not positive reflection, but just more constructive in our reflection. So that's that reflect phase. The next phase is called rest. And this is anything that just starts to calm our brain. And as you were talking about before, think about surgeons, doctors, how many stakeholders they have, how busy their day is, how many different hats they have to wear. Like during the day, their brain's just going.
They're on fire all day long.
Yeah, literally. Like we're just putting out fires all day. Yeah. And we often take that brain home, but that means we walk in the house, we're finishing our partner's sentences because they don't talk fast enough, and we yell at the kids because they're not effective with the time that they have. And, we drag that home, which drives conflict. So the rest phase was anything that just starts them to be present. Could be a conversation with a friend, could be Sudoku on the bus, reading a book on the train, a podcast in your car, even exercise. So that's all about, can I calm my brain and be more focused? And the last phase is just called reset, which is where we think about, okay, I'm about to go into my home environment. What's my intention? If I live on my own, it might be, I want to go home. I want to switch off. I want to socially connect. I want to engage in a hobby. And then how do I have to behave for that to be a reality? And if you work with if you have a family, as I do, as I sort of walk towards the house, I visualize what kind of dad do I want to be, what sort of partner. So that was the 3 steps: reflect, rest, reset. And we found that was the ultimate transition. Now, one thing about this model is it's very portable. Like it's flexible, and depending on the transition, you might use part of it or you might not. Like if you have a really bad interaction, that reflection phase might have to be stretched out. You might have to debrief with someone, get support. If you're a surgeon moving between consults with patients, so you're not in the OR, you're seeing patients. Even that question of, how am I about to show up for this person? How am I about to, like, what sort of interaction do I want to have? How do I want to make them feel? We were working actually with some cardiothoracic surgeons at Royal North Shore Hospital, and one thing's, oh gosh, I've forgotten his name. I think his last name was Gupta. Oh, he was just a great guy. One of the surgeons there, he called me and said, I've been using your thing. And he says, as I hold the doorknob to go into the consult room, I think to myself, if that was my mum on the other side of this door, how would I want her treated? And he said, it's a 5-second pause, but it makes me conscious. It makes me self-aware. So, this concept is so applicable to so many different parts of our life.
Yeah, God, that reminds me of when I was in clinic and it was so busy and there's so many patients, and I didn't even, I guess I started doing it intentionally, but I would do exactly what Dr. Gupta did. And the team would be behind me. I'd put my hand on the doorknob and I'd pause for 30 seconds. And we'd all just stand there, and collectively the energy kind of simmered down and we entered in a different state. Just that simple pause made such a difference how we entered that room. It was really remarkable.
Do you know what, Michael? Here's one of the biggest pieces of feedback from those cardiothoracic surgeons was often we show up with judgment. So if we've had to give someone really bad advice, really bad news in terms of, whether their condition's terminal or, we then often go into a patient and, their LDLs are elevated or, it's not that big of a deal, but they're distressed, and we look at them with judgment rather than, well, for this person, that's a big deal. Yeah. So, and I think a hard thing for your listeners is that you deal with such big important events
Mhm.
and you can have really challenging days, is we almost look at other people and go, just get over yourself, would you?
Yeah. What's the big,
But
what's the,
yeah,
yeah.
so it's also reminding ourselves to go in, and it mightn't be a life or death situation, but for this person that might be distressing, and how do I support them? How do I comfort them? Yeah.
I had that experience with, I have 6 children, and after I got through some of my challenges in life and was reoriented towards a different way of living,
Yeah.
I asked my kids about, me and, that. And I learned from asking them, because they now felt a lot safer around me, did they feel comfortable coming to me with problems,
Yeah.
and they didn't. They because they said specifically, we knew what we would hear from you. It was not that big a deal. Just buck up and get over it,
Yeah.
And I mean, my heart ached when they told me that, because I wasn't fully there for them to express what their struggles were during the day, that I dismissed in many ways as being kind of almost no big deal.
Yeah.
And so I do have regrets about that. And it speaks to what you were just talking about, that the relative nature of things in their world. Our child at school can have a bad interaction with one friend and it can derail their day.
Yeah.
And they're in a rotten mood. And you come in and you say it's no big deal. Well, it's a goddamn big deal, and so, yeah, this is crucial to put yourself into perspective of your family and others that are there.
Yeah. Man, like what you talk about there hits hard.
Yeah.
And particularly, in my career, I've been very driven, worked hard, was away a lot, but I would often come home and I've still got that mentality of I'm at work and I just kind of leave a trail of destruction behind me. And probably the coolest thing about my job is, I get to meet amazing people and really wise people. Like, I've shared the stage with Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, who's like a delightful human being. The Dalai Lama, Ken Robinson. Like, I get to meet these people, and also I get to meet like really senior business people. And I was doing an event for Bank of America, actually, and some of their global heads saw me present the third space, and at the dinner they came up and went, I wish I'd seen that 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago, I know. Yeah.
And they said, obviously I'm very successful and I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of the money I've earned and what I've been able to provide. But they said, my regret is that the people that meant the most to me got the worst version of me, because often work got the best of me, and then I walk through that door, I have nothing left.
They get the leftovers.
Yeah. And what the third space is really about is, how do I use that gap between work and home, whether I'm working at home or I'm commuting from the hospital or an office? Like, how do I use that transition to show up and be a better version of myself for the people that actually matter?
Yeah.
So, I mean, geez, we're getting deep now, Michael. This is
Yeah,
sounding like
really
counseling for each other.
Yeah. And the thing about kids and your spouse or significant other is that it can be a slow downward spiral in the relationship if you're not cautious. You think everything's okay, but there's this chronic drip, drip, drip of lack of connection, when you come in like that and you're not really putting yourself in their shoes and talking to them and seeing how their day was and listening, and the separation just gets wider and wider and wider over time. I'm convinced it's a major cause of relationship discord, this process.
Gosh, I know it's 10:30 in Sydney time, but I feel like I need a glass of wine after this conversation. Lament on my bad parenting. But actually, you know what? One of the coolest things that's ever happened to me is I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was presenting at a conference, and it was for sales managers for a tech company, right? So these guys are on the road. They go out, they're selling, software and all sorts of solutions. And so I spoke at this conference and I went to the drinks afterwards, and this family walk in, like a woman, 2 daughters, and a guy who I recognized from the conference, and they're all crying. And the mum, like the woman, walks up to me, points at me, turns to her husband and says, "Is this the guy?" And I've just gone, "Oh man, what have I done?" Like, far out.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Yeah." And she hugs me, and the 2 daughters come in for a hug. And I'm just going, what the hell's going on? And what they said is, this guy was sitting in my talk, and he said it hit hard.
You
Like,
saw it in
it
an
hit.
instant. It was life-changing. Yeah.
He just went, "Oh man." And he went back to the hotel room because, like, you know, he was from Seattle, I think. And so the whole family was making it a little trip. He sat his family down on the bed in the hotel room and just went, "I just watched this guy, and I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so sorry how I've treated you." You know, and she just went, "Oh my God," like he's never said. So that moment for them was such a profound one.
It's a total shift. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shift, yeah. Yeah. You know, and the other thing is, I believe, you know, and I've seen this in my colleagues when I've been to their homes and stuff. They come in home into the house as a surgeon, you know.
Yeah.
And you're not a surgeon when you're at home. You're a partner and a parent, you know, and to make that shift is really important. And yeah, this is why this third space concept is so wonderful. I'd like to drill in a little bit, if the time we have left here, to talk about the specifics and the value of that positive reflection. Just talk about that a little more, because that negative focus that we naturally have as human beings, you know, and the power of it, as evidenced by the military doing this. That's kind of a, you know, Barbara Friedrichsen's, you know, positive building, you know, positive emotions and building on that, and recognizing what you do well. And you want to talk about that or elaborate on that a little bit?
I think it's a really good question. Now, what I'm saying here, just to give you a bit of background to me, like, obviously I'm an academic researcher, and, you know, I don't do sort of herbal and fluffy stuff that much, in terms of, like, everything we talk about is peer reviewed or has been validated in some way. But that reflection is not being a delusional Pollyanna optimist, or it's not about so I think what's happened in society is we've started to demonize negative emotion, where we look at it and go, if we're not in a positive state, that's a bad thing. You know, negative emotion's very important. It has so many functions. So this is not about being the motivated, you know, if a friend is a stranger is a friend I haven't met yet. It's not about having this delusional mindset. It's about, when I reflect, do I reflect in a constructive way?
Constructive.
So yeah, like, is it actually serving me? Because often we reflect, we beat ourselves up, or we're just delusional, or maybe our ego doesn't allow us to explore a situation properly. If I've had an argument with someone I work with, when I reflect, do I go, okay, you know, what was my role in that, or how could I have handled that better? So those 3 questions just help us look at, okay, if I think about my day, like, what was good about that? You know, I think I handled that patient really well, or I led my team well, or I was effective. You know, so did I evolve today? Did I get better? How did I improve? So it's just that these ones make us focus on evolution and progress. And when we do that, we get a burst of happiness, and the mindset we take forward is much more optimistic. So that's why we're doing it. And look, I worked on a project. We were working with the royal family of Kuwait, looking at, you know, how we could make the country of Kuwait happier. You know, we're exploring, you know, the role of happiness in their society. And there was a brilliant researcher there, Sonia, I say her last name wrong. It's a Russian name, Nagoski, not Nagoski. But she's done amazing research in gratitude and the importance of gratitude and how it relates to quality of life. So part of that reflection is also, well, I'm grateful for that opportunity or that experience, or, you know, this was what was good about the day, or this is what was good about that interaction. So, I mean, that reflect phase has multiple layers of benefit that come from it.
Yeah, and it doesn't take that much.
It really doesn't. And probably the biggest thing it develops is self-awareness.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, people listening to this are leaders. You have a very prominent role in whether it's your clinic or a hospital. They have these important roles where they affect a lot of people. And if you look at leadership research, like proper leadership research, self-awareness is the bedrock.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number one.
Like it's all about that.
Yes.
And Susan David, I think, is doing some really amazing work around granularity of emotion. So can we actually articulate our emotion? And most people just can do happy, sad, angry. Yeah, that's their emotional vocabulary.
This is hitting home because I'll tell the story after this.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's that reflection of, okay, I had that argument with that person. What prompted that? Well, it's because I was angry. But actually, if I reflect, it wasn't anger. I felt judged by that person, or I felt unsupported, or I felt victimized. Yeah, it's that ability to go, you know, what was really going on for me? Like, why did I snap at that person? So that reflection not only helps us move forward, but also develops our self-awareness, our emotional vocab. Yeah, it's vital. What were you going to say about?
So, as I told you, I mean, I went to Hazelden for 3 months for prescription narcotic addiction, and prior to that, I kind of felt like I had two emotions. I was in a good mood or I was in a shitty mood. And I was actually quite serious. And certainly I had more nuance than just those two binary polar opposites.
Yep.
But it was remarkable. And while I was in treatment, you know, I had to like talk about my emotions a little more and stuff. And,
yeah.
And when I got out, I made it a point to like actually dig a little deeper. And one of the problems that I experienced, you know, and I think people that are running in the fast lane, is that you're always on this surface level of conscious awareness. You know, you're staying in one lane, and you don't dip down and figure out what's going on under the hood that can help you navigate things in a much more effective way. It's very powerful, and I learned my lesson the hard way, but it is incredibly important to take time to reflect, journal, you know, whatever it is, it leads you to a better understanding of yourself and what's going on with your emotions. You know, they're remarkable.
Yeah. I am. One of the big parts of our research also looks at is burnout. So how the third space research fits into burnout is if we do this at the end of our day, you know, we're much less likely to burn out. And I was talking to a mate of mine who's a doctor, and he was saying he had a patient come in that was so burnt out, he literally couldn't feel anymore.
Yeah.
And he just had a newborn baby. And he said to the doctor, he said,
like, whatever.
Well, he just went, I held this child and I felt nothing. Like I'm so depleted.
So depleted.
Yeah. And we get so disconnected. And we've been doing a lot of work with partners in professional services firms. So your big firms like your EYs, your KPMGs, and, you know, just seeing that, you talked about it earlier, they just drift further and further away from their family. But their narrative is, well, I'm working hard for my family. I'm doing all of this for them, which is a total cop-out. But you know, you just see that the partner, he or her, starts to become really, they divert from their family and they become disconnected. And then it gets to a point where they can't bring it back anymore. The
slow downward spiral that I referred to. And I even say they're becoming disconnected from themselves in a big way. You know, what's really going on with them? You know, I mean, in my world, one of the things we are inculcated with is this discipline and keep going no matter what. And, you know, we tend to treat ourselves like machines, you know, that we can just power through everything. And I believe if you have these skills to really know yourself and what you're experiencing and what your emotional makeup is, you can lose that over time if you had that beginning, you know.
And how much do you think, because you're one of these people where you're clearly, like, you told me about your background. I was like, my gosh, I feel lazy. But like, you're clearly incredibly bright and capable, as the people that are listening to this are, and they're often the smartest person in the room, and they've been told they're brilliant their whole life. And I think so much of their identity is wrapped up in, well, I am the smart one, or I am the surgeon, or I am this, or I am that. So I think it's not only the individuals driving that, but it's also the people around them.
The system and the environment you're in, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you a question? Just because I'm taking over as host right now.
No, that's fine. That's fun.
Just because I'm thinking about the audience here, do you think, because obviously you've had some realizations, some people call it a come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
And I often see men in their 50s, 60s kind of go, oh, wow, wait on, this wasn't what I wanted, or I thought this was going to fill the hole inside. And they get to the point where things are so bad, they have to really reassess. Here's my exact question. Do you think you can dramatically evolve your life or you as a person without pain? Meaning, I'm addicted to opioids, or my family life has just totally fallen apart, or I realize I have no friends left, or my health or my mental health is in the toilet. Like, do you think we need the crisis before we can evolve?
Well, some people like myself apparently do need a crisis, because I had one, but I didn't know or have the skills at the time to find my way out of the pit that I was in.
Yeah.
I just didn't know. I had no real understanding. I was so immersed in the world and thinking like a surgeon, and that is, you push, you have discipline, you keep, being strong. And I just didn't understand what the other skills were necessary to evolve. And so one of the things that I've worked hard on with my children, and others, is to help them wake up to this other side of living.
Yeah.
And that is to detach, learn the skills of self-compassion, gratitude, and all that. And I think with high level intentionality about how you're doing and what is working in your life, and knowing where you want to go, I think it's possible to evolve without massive crisis and pain, for sure. But it's also pretty clear, and I'd love your thoughts on this, that pain, struggle, discomfort are crucial to our evolution and to our ability to navigate life's challenges. And so somehow it's a combination of those two, without getting so deep in the crisis jungle like I ended up in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say two things about this. Just tell me if this doesn't answer your question, but and this is not by design, but by luck. I've been very lucky in that I latch on to mentors, and I kind of stalk them so much they just finally give in.
Yes, I've done the same thing.
Yeah. Like, I'll read I don't care. I'll read someone's research. I read a paper from the US and I looked them up and rang their office number at a university. And like I will seek people out. And that's something I've done. And I've had really good mentors who have warned me about this. So, definitely not perfect. Definitely could be a far better husband, far better dad. But these strong mentors just kind of pulled me aside and said, cut it out. Like, you're on a bad path.
Wake up here.
You gotta cut that stuff out.
Yeah.
So I think mentors can help. The second part was struggle and challenge. So we just wrote a book called Strive.
Yeah.
And Strive looks at our relationship with challenge and struggle and how it has changed. And what we've found is, because of the happiness movement and positive psychology, we've gone too far. Where we look at negative emotion or negative thoughts or negative anything, we demonize and go, that's bad. So it's kind of like the happiness movement. Its one key message is positive, like positivity is good and good for you. Negativity is bad and bad for you. So what's happened is we've got a whole generation of kids coming through going, I don't want to struggle. I don't want to challenge.
Expectations are skewed beyond belief. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got parents that are micromanaging schools. And even now, I think I was reading some of Jonathan Hyatt's stuff, where you've got parents showing up to universities talking to lecturers about giving their kid a better mark. Like
I came across the term snowplow parents in the book
Yes.
Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, which is a brilliant book. Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. So what our research shows is that struggle, discomfort, challenge are critically important.
Critically important. Yeah.
Yeah. And this doesn't mean trauma. Like what I'm talking about is growth-centric struggle.
Exactly.
So I take on a struggle that in order to handle it, I have to grow and evolve.
And that's crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got to get your butt kicked from time to time.
You do. Yeah.
Yeah. So my view of discomfort has totally changed, because what we find in our data is it's just so important, particularly for self-esteem.
Yeah. It really is. And I remember I've always enjoyed becoming uncomfortable in any almost number of circumstances. I love the challenge of being uncomfortable, stretching, those things. And I believe you can really learn to enjoy that. It's a really positive thing.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you're one of the rare ones. Oh, actually, no, because I mean, your generation and my generation, like we that was our life. You grew up in a tough background. Like you were talking to me about it before. And while it's no one wants that, it gives you skills and abilities that most people don't have.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So I think, what we're seeing now is parents, and there's multitude of factors here. People are having less children. You said you got 6. That just makes me feel tired. I've got 2. Most of my friends have 1.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like I'm putting all my eggs in one basket, and I'm going to look after that thing, and I'm going to make sure they have the best life ever. So we get far too involved, as well as society's view of, we shouldn't be uncomfortable. We should be happy. And even think about political discourse where we can't debate because we can't offend anyone anymore. So
I know there's problems all over the place.
But that's my soapbox talk on struggle and challenge.
Well, so in terms of the third space, to wrap that up, one of the things I'd like your thoughts on, and I think this is so important, and one thing that we don't use enough, and that's visualization. And I'm talking about the third step here. And actually the reset part, where you actually visualize in your head going in the door, seeing your spouse, seeing them and being happy to see them. I mean, you picture it. And I always use Michael Phelps as my example for this, because he was so focused on visualization before each swim. I mean, he's just so utterly concentrated on visualizing the entire thing. And I think it's a power that is not utilized by our magnificent brains enough. So what are your thoughts around that and the science of that?
I just think you described it perfectly. I mean, that reset phase is about that visualization.
Yeah.
But it's also just getting familiar with the environment we're about to go into, or looking at the possibilities. So one of the soldiers that triggered this, he said, I went and saw a psychologist, and the psychologist said, hey, you've been away for 6 months. When you come home, your family's in a totally different groove. The house works without you. You are going to come in and you're going to disrupt it. But the problem was, many of this, I'm putting a gender lens on this, but most of the soldiers I worked with were males who came home and went, right, Dad's home, I'm in charge. And the families went, what?
No.
We've been doing fine without you. So what the psychologist got him to do was visualize as he's coming home, what's been going on since you're away, how do you want to behave, what sort of interaction do you want to have? So I think it's a critical part, whether it's I'm a leader. I'm about to go into a team meeting. We've had a challenging period, so my staff might be feeling flat, disengaged. How do I support them?
Yes.
Even, I travel for work, and my wife has her own career, and she's far brighter than I am. And so, but when I'm away, she's got to manage both girls, the house, her work. So I was away for 3 days recently, and as I was walking home, I was thinking, I'm not going to be greeted by the Stepford housewife. I'm probably going to be greeted by Kathy Bates from Misery, that I've had your children for 3 days and I need a break. So as I go in there, I'm not thinking, oh man, I've been on the road for 3 days. What's my wife going to do to make me feel good? It's much more.
You should have dinner and ready and everything's perfect.
Yeah. Where are my slippers? I go in with that mentality of, man, she's going to need a break. She's going to need compassion. The kids haven't seen me for a while. They're going to want to hang out and play and be fun. So the visualization piece is critical. Like after we record this, I have to jump into a virtual meeting with my team. And someone pointed out in a meeting the other day, they said, hey, you're a bit of a jerk in that meeting. And you said something that I think offended literally all of us. So now what I have to do after I finish talking to you is meet with my team, apologize, be humble, and really sort of swallow that bitter pill. So the visualization piece is so important.
So critical.
Yeah.
Really critical. And you also have done actual research on the impact of the third space. And I'd love to get your comments on the data, that you found in terms of its benefit for people.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've measured this in multiple ways, but one of the areas we looked at the most is what we've been talking about, which is how do we transition from work to home? So we got a group of 600 senior leaders, and we got them to practice those 3 steps in that transition from work to home: reflect, rest, reset. Now, they all did it and made it suit their world and their context and their family situation, but they all did these steps. And one of the things we measured was mood in the home. And what we showed is after a month, the mood of the home improved by 43%. We saw this massive improvement. What was also really interesting is because of this, the family were more forgiving of work intruding in personal time. And I mean, look, we've been exploring this for about 15 years now. It's such an effective concept. And we've got a lot of data that backs up the validity behind it. And for people listening to this, if you have a partner, if you have kids, go home and talk to them about this.
Yes.
I listened to this thing. This guy talked about this concept. How do I make it work? Like, how could I, or what could we do as a family to help that occur? Yeah.
So, in summary here, what I would tell everybody, like, we've got so much stuff coming at us these days about stuff we should be doing, our diet, sleep, everything else. And here's another thing. But I feel like this is so high bang for the buck, this small activity. But it is a practice, isn't it, Adam? I mean, you've got to develop the practice just like anything else. And once it becomes part of your normal existence, it can change your life.
Yeah. And one thing we have found in the data is it's skill-based. We get better at it.
Yeah, of course.
And the more we practice it, the better we get. We've also done a lot of work with, obstetricians, surgeons that were on call, and talking about their ability to be much more present in the moment when they practice this of, I've either got to run back to the hospital or I've got to, step into a phone meeting that's interrupted by family time. What they talk about is that normally after that call, I'd ruminate a lot more, or I'd still be thinking about it. And they said just that ability to rapidly transition get back into family mode is really vital. So yeah, practicing it just develops this skill basis and allows us to implement these strategies and get better outcomes quickly.
And I would imagine that the more you do it, the better you become at it. It becomes almost second nature then. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So, well, this has been great. And I really hope our listeners really take this to heart, because I know that this is one of the most powerful small things that they can do to enhance their personal lives and their relationships with others wherever they go. So I'm just so grateful that you took the time to join us, but in particular for your work on the third space and your talk and everything. Really,
it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. And
great conversation.
Michael, hearing about your background and what you've done and what you've achieved, like, it's just excellent. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And obviously, the people listening to this do such an important, challenging job that, I hope they apply some of these things to help their life get a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, I'll refer people to your website, Dr. Adam Fraser, and anything else you would like me to offer up to the audience in terms of being able to reach out to you if they want.
Yeah, look, if they want to learn more about this concept, Dr. Adam Fraser, as in Dr. Adam Fraser with an S.com. We've got the Third Space book that people can access that goes into all our research and talks a lot more about the micro transitions of our day. So
I love that term, micro.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah.
It's
just those little pieces in our day.
Micro transitions. That's wonderful.
But no, it's been great. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. You're welcome. And thank you so much, Adam. This has been The Resilient Surgeon, a podcast brought to you by the Society of Thoracic Surgeons. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, please rate it 5 stars and let your friends, trainees, and colleagues know about it. On social media, you can use the hashtag #BeYourBestSelf. More information about the Society of Thoracic Surgeons is available online at sts.org.